a lot of people had their homes bought from them by the city, and they took their houses off the foundation and took them by trucks up to higher ground on what was the outskirts of Neversink. And they built new foundations for their homes and put the old homes on the foundations. But I understand that before that, before the city came, that Neversink was a very big town, even bigger than Liberty.
Wow.
That's what I was told by Vic Leroy, who was the police chief in Liberty at the time. That's around 1950 some.
So it kind of shrank. The town shrank, Neversink.
Yes, because Neversink sank
Yeah.
and is now underwater. And we just moved the community, or they moved the community a little bit higher.
But the other thing that's interesting about my father and the land here is that in the 40s, after he finished college and the war wrapped up, he came back from the war, he moved back into the old family house up here. And he was working at a sawmill. My father loved wood his whole life. He's been a woodworker. And so he's working at a sawmill. No, wait, I've got it mixed up. He was working at, the only job he could get was working on the reservoir. Sorry, that was it. So he's working on the reservoir, just in and around filling it in, and, doing initial work. He had known the town before.
Wait, this is
Neversink Reservoir.
construction of-
Yeah,
Oh,
on a construction crew in the Neversink Reservoir. And three guys came down and were inquiring about jobs working on the reservoir. And he knew that these three guys had worked at the sawmill up by his house in Claryville, so he knew that there must be vacancies. So he quit the reservoir job and went up the road and got the sawmill job, which is the one he really wanted, right near his house in Claryville. And a few days later, there was a blasting accident on the reservoir project, and these three guys one of them had taken his vacancy, and one of them was killed. So I don't know which one it was, but so I hear these stories about the past and how hard things were and how random life is. It's just amazing to think here we live and we don't know the stories of what came before us. But
And then I worked on the dams here because they paid the most money. I worked in the tunnels here. I can't remember the dates when it was, but it was a long time ago. No. I also worked in the tunnels. In shaft 2A, where you went down the ground, I don't know, 800-900 feet, something like that, to get the tunnel made for New York City water supply. On some of the construction jobs that I worked for the companies, I was a driller. That's on a machine that drills rock. I worked with blasting, dynamite, caps. That's the unit that sets off the dynamite. In other words, I worked with what they call blasters.
With the DEP, in other words, for many years we know that there was a lot of opposition between state and the DEP, the city. Okay, you had the other opposition, which we had a really nice presentation the other day at the museum. That they had 4 guest speakers that were from old families that lived here, and they were forced from their farmlands and their homes. One of them happened to be our nephew, and Adam Hornbeck, and they were talking about, how they, in other words, the animosity. But Adam's story is kind of unique because he came full circle. All right, that his grandparents, it was just one afternoon, okay, they were playing checkers in what they called Eureka, his grandfather. And they came, and while he was gone, they posted the signs, okay, that it was, it's condemned, okay, the houses. And when they went home, that they were condemned, many of the people hired lawyers. All right, so if the city offered them, let's just say, $10,000, most of them wound up with 7,000 because they had to pay for the lawyers. So, all right, so they had that animosity. But Adam went to college, all right, and it's a new generation. And Adam's got to be probably about 54 now, but he is the surveyor for the New York City Water Department. All right, so he's saying, in other words, what was caused animosity years ago, he still has the homestead. He and his wife, all right, have built a log cabin up on Rocky Hill where the family was, in other words, bought new land and rebuilt a homestead up there.
Because they came home from shopping, an eviction notice was nailed to the garage door, and the city evicted them. And it took 2 years for them to get their money, and they had a time limit to be removed from the property. And then they went up over the hill to another farmer that was walking distance from that farm, and he luckily was ready to sell. It was him and his wife, and my father bought that farm. So that farm property adjoined it some of the farm property that my dad already owned, where the city evicted them. And so the city didn't take the whole amount of acreage. The other acreage that wasn't going to be a problem for the reservoir was that could remain holding, and he added it to the farm that he bought. So in the end, he had 300 acres.
And so, in the end, do you think it turned out okay for them? You know, obviously it was a shock.
Well, yeah, it was okay. What are you going to do? You move on.
Yeah.
That's how life is in those days. You're happy to have a house to live in.